just going to very quickly go through a PowerPoint, kind of hitting the highlights of Reading Ladders by Terry Lassane. It was one whole section just to just kind of highlight what she said. One of the quotes was, "You mean you have to go to school to do that?" We need to be able to communicate to naysayers that literature for teens is not some sort of dumbed down version of real literature, especially as a school librarian. Many schools, many states are looking to libraries as being not necessarily extensions of the school or the hub of the school. In some places it's looked at as, we don't need them anymore. We don't need a school librarian or a certified librarian to run those, and we need to be able to, especially middle school, junior high, high school, instead of gearing everything, we are gearing everything toward that college and career ready with informational text, but we also still need to realize that our youngsters need good quality literature. So the second bullet, a good deal of our classic literature was written for adults with adult experiences and knowledge, and a good deal of that classic literature can be relevant to today, but a bridge needs to be built. If you tell a junior class that they are reading The Scarlet Letter, think of the groans, the moans, the eye rolling that ends up happening. And I think that's what a lot of our literacy or English teachers face, is they are trying to jump right into these classic literature pieces without really bridging for our students, for our youngsters. We need to first hook our kids on wanting to read, and then we can go deeper with those classic literature pieces. Rigor. Young adult lit should have substance, style, and structure. It should have sophistication of thought, depth of character development, stylistic choices, and mastery of language. It should not just be a bubblegum read, very easy, but it should be accessible to the students. It still does need, though, to have that substance, style, and structure. It does need to be relevant. It needs a connection to the reader. It needs challenges and joys of being a teen, and it needs to be current. The second bullet down, the meaning in the reader versus the meaning in the text. The reader needs to be able to connect with the meaning in the text. If you have conflicts that are going on that are totally outside the realm of what your reader is going through, sometimes those connections are really, really hard to make. So especially for young adult literature, you do need to have some type of meaning connected to that reader, and typically it's teen angst. It is conflicts with parents and other adults, but that needs to also then connect to the meaning in the text itself. For young adult literature, there do need to be relationships. Young adult literature should build relationships within the story, and it should also be used to create empathy. Response. Young adult literature. There is no one correct interpretation of a piece of literature. We need to be very careful when we talk to students about what they are reading and what kind of response they have to it, and make sure that we don't cloud their response with our expectation. One example is The Hunger Games. I experienced The Hunger Games as a person in my 30s. So my experience and my response to that literature was completely different than a 13 or 14-year-old student that I would talk with. And I needed to be very careful not to take my perceptions and my interpretations and kind of throw them at my middle school students. They didn't, in a lot of ways, they didn't get what was going on with the entire society as what I did. Um, they were more involved in the love story between Peeta and Katniss, or Gale and Katniss, the relationship between the mom and the daughter, the mom and the sister, rather than society as a whole. And I needed to make sure that when a student told me what their response was, that I didn't try to take my interpretation and kind of dump it on them. Lincoln Logs. Within the text, there was a section on how do we begin to build lifelong readers. Reading out loud. We need 15 minutes a day, minimum of 3 days a week, even up through middle school and through high school. I know that that's hard. I know that it's frowned upon in many areas because there just isn't time, but we really need to hook our kids. The students need access to books. You can't sustain a habit without access. So if your teachers did not go through Lit Lab and don't have classroom libraries, you need to make sure that you push more to get your students into your library or into a place where there is a lot of access of books. We need to be models of literacy. They need to see us engaged. When we give our students time to sit and read, if you have that drop everything and read time, dear, they need to see you settle down, not grading papers, not doing other things, not setting up for other things. They need to see you engaged in your own literature. And the students, they need time to read. Practice makes perfect. Readers are made, not born. Non-readers are made, not born. If you think about these two statements, really sit and think about them. When you have a student immediately say, oh, I don't like to read, or you have a parent of a student that says, oh, they don't like to read, they just never did. Somewhere there had to be some disconnect, maybe not enough time was spent. And I look at my 3 boys and I know that I have not done as good of a job as a parent with my 3rd son as I did with the other 2. It seems like I've always either been working on my national boards or I was working on my doctorate, and I did not take as much time to sit and read, but we do still try. He's 8 now. We still do try to make those connections. And a few weeks ago, he asked me to read a Big Nate book out loud to him at night, and we read the entire book. It took us, 7, 8 nights. But it was something that I needed to do. And I'm hoping to help make him into a reader, more so than a non-reader. Motivating readers. Real motivation is intrinsic. It leads to engagement. You can do motivation through extrinsic ideas, accelerated reader, points and goals and things like that. But I definitely think accelerated reader has a place and a purpose, but true motivation does need to be intrinsic, for those students to be lifelong readers. There are 3 variables of producing effective readers, and for some reason I don't know why I didn't finish that. There are book variables, and I'll come back to these, student variables, and school variables. So if we go back to the book variables, the title of the book, it matters. The cover of the book, it matters. The opening paragraph, those are those hooks. If a kid hates the cover, isn't too sure about the title, then you need to hook them some other way. Form and format, some students like books that are written as a journal or a diary, others don't. Some like it with pictures. Genre definitely matters. Some kids say they don't like historical fiction, but if you can find a style or a form or a format that they like, you can sometimes get them to kind of jump over to the other side. But definitely, pay attention to what kids like as far as genre and even their writing style. Student variables, gender. Gender's huge. Boys typically don't like to read books with girls on the front cover, real prominent, or if it looks too girly. Girls don't seem to care as much, but gender definitely plays a factor. And school variables. Classroom libraries, if you have books and comfortable seating, that will definitely matter. School libraries, regular access and controlled choices, those will affect how your students read. They definitely need regular access. Controlled choices does not mean you are putting a specific book in the hands of the kids, but you do need to steer them to those books that you think they'll like and not just what their buddy is checking out, because otherwise they'll quit the book. They'll abandon it. You also need administrative support. You need funding and you need time and ways to model effective reading strategies. To create lifelong readers, Classroom Library needs to have appeal. It needs to be appropriate. It needs to have quality literature. Needs to have different literature for different genders. It needs to be arranged so it's accessible. And you need to make sure that your teachers have read the books. That's one of the biggest things with the classroom libraries. When Ken Stamatis did his book talks, he's wonderful, fabulous. I wanted to read every book that he did. However, occasionally he would be book talking and a fifth grade teacher would purchase the entire list of his picks. Not that those were appropriate for those fifth graders. So you need to make sure if your teachers are using those classroom libraries, or if you have your own classroom library, that you are paying attention to these items. The arrangement, I know it's hard to keep up with in a classroom, but it just needs to happen rather than just having thousands of books or hundreds of books just stacked on shelves. Reading aloud. Reading aloud models fluency and how a book should sound. It motivates reading and it develops listening skills and reading comprehension. Book talking. Finding the right book, those that don't sell themselves but should, those are ones that you need to be pushing. Don't book talk the books that everyone is already reading. The right way to tell. Whet their appetite, but don't give them too much. Connect one book to another, if at all possible, when you're doing a set of books, 3 or 4. Okay, building your reading ladders, you've got two different types. You have horizontal reading ladders, you have vertical reading ladders. Horizontal, that is when you read books serially or by one author. You're going horizontally. Vertical reading is when you move upward, often without bridges. That's when you leap from one different book to another. There's no real cohesion, same authors, same series. Reading ladders take a student from one level of reading to the next logical level.